when he walked out of Madison Square Garden, it was bananas.
Really?
It was, the whole place was cheering. He walks out to Kid Rock's American Badass with Kid Rock and Tucker Carlson walking in like the right-wing Avengers. And the place went nuts. I'm telling you, the fucking cheers of the crowd were nuts. I mean, it was overwhelmingly in support of him, and it lasted a long time. I mean, it was a roar. I mean, you had to hear what the crowd sounded like before he walked in, and then when he did. I mean, it was just overwhelming cheers for like over a minute. I mean, just imagine a minute of people screaming at the top of their lungs. Yeah.
Hey there, guys. Welcome to the channel. So Joe Rogan says that Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, Kid Rock, Dana White, and Don Jr. all walking out to a friendly crowd at UFC is like watching the right-wing Avengers. And I got to say, as funny as that sounds, I agree with him. That's a pretty formidable group of Avengers. And let me know in the comments if you agree. And apparently it's not just all show. Word on the street was that Kid Rock was actually taking the opportunity to give the CEO of Anheuser-Busch a real hard time. I'm going to show you that. But before I do, guys, thank you so much to everyone that's been subscribing and leaving such great comments. Really do appreciate the support. If you haven't already, please help us to continue to grow. Like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel.
Speaking of that UFC fight, I'm standing there with our favorite president.
Right.
And someone comes over to like the CEO of Anheuser-Busch standing right behind you.
Right.
So I go to the POTUS. I'm like, hey, that's the CEO of Anheuser-Busch. Trump's like, you want to go talk to him? I'm like, I do. So me and him go over. We actually had a great conversation.
Really?
Because, you know, if you put this in context, why did this start? It's like, you know, I told him that night, I go, you signaled to a lot of people like myself, like-minded people. Put the trans thing aside for a minute, right? I was like, but by sending that can to the trans kid, you kind of signaled to us you support this lifestyle, and more importantly, like men being in women's sports or in my granddaughter's locker room. Most of us draw a hard line right there. Nah. What are you doing?
You have a granddaughter. You're like 40,
two grandkids.
You're like 42 years old. Well, go ahead.
It gets cold in Detroit, Sean.
Yeah, I guess it does.
So I said, you signaled that to us. I said, but speaking of, I was like, you know, if someone wants to be trans, I was like, I didn't rip that kid. I said, F you guys. I said, I didn't even say boycott or cancel. I said, F you. I said, what are you doing? Injecting yourself into this conversation, these polarizing social issues. I was like, you know, you could be doing so much more positive stuff, just making us laugh and drink beer. But I said, if someone wants to dress up like a girl, they want to be transgender or whatever, a lot of people fought and died for them to do that. Go for it. We can coexist. You know, in public places, you might not be my first dinner invite, you know what I mean? And I'm probably not yours. And if you're gay, no one cares anymore, right? We all got gay family members, gay friends, gay co-workers. It's like, cut it out. Just be gay. You know, I'm not going to clap louder for you.
You know what I hear you saying? You believe in freedom.
Yeah.
But if you want to indoctrinate kids in school,
that's right. I tell my, let me say this to the trans and gay community right now. Be yourself. That's cool. You're cool with me. I'm cool with you. That's how most people are. But as soon as you bring our kids into this, that's where you're going to bring hatred into it.
Yeah, so according to Kid Rock, he had a pretty great conversation with the CEO of Anheuser-Busch, and just told him what a lot of people were all thinking, you know, which is, you know, speaking for myself, no one actually cares. I don't think anyone really cares about trans-identified this or this identity that or whatever. No one cares, man, until you involve the kids or the grandkids. So that's the extent of their conversation. Maybe it was a little bit polite for an Avenger. Maybe, I don't know. But I guess when you're a right-wing Avenger, you're probably pretty polite. You're also probably pretty reasonable, pretty intelligent, good-looking. Anyway, so joking aside, Rogan is right on. He's spot on, which is really exactly what makes all the leftists that hide amongst us, you know, literally lose their minds, right? It convinces them that Joe Rogan is himself some sort of dangerous right-winger, when really, if you study the guy and any of his positions, he's a lot like Bill Maher, you know, just a very classic liberal, an old school liberal. It just shows you really how incredibly rare a real classical liberal really is these days, how rare they really are. You know, I used to call them ACLU Democrats. They cared about civil rights. They cared about, you know, government overreach. They cared about all the really reasonable things that now make you sound like a crazy right-winger now. But it's crazy what really is considered to be right-wing, and daring to question the official narrative, daring to question the government, or even daring, to say what the other side is thinking. You got to be crazy, I guess.
Yeah. And the people that love Trump, they feel like this is a witch hunt. And they feel like all the things he's getting indicted for are bullshit anyway. Not only does it not work, but it kind of hardens their position that he's being targeted. And that these are like the actions of a banana republic. You take your political rival and you arrest him. And specifically, you charge him with things that you're fucking guilty of. Like the documents, like the classified documents. Biden's guilty of the exact same issue.
Yeah, so things like that, man, they're just an example of the sorts of things that Rogan just points out that drive the left totally crazy. In this video, guys, it's not even about this, so I won't belabor the point, but I will say that he's wrong about Trump and Biden being guilty of the same thing regarding classified documents. That's not true. Biden's is much, much worse. But anyway, he is correct that the people who support Trump, and not even like MAGA Trump supporters, but just about everyone with any critical thinking skills, can recognize that there's a pretty high probability that these are politically motivated persecutions, especially if we're to believe the rumors that the Biden classified documents case is just real close to being just wrapped up, and they're not going to do anything about it. They're going to decide that he did nothing wrong, even though senators are not allowed to possess classified documents at all outside of a secure location, except under very, very, very rare circumstances. And of course, pointing any of these things out just makes you a complete nut, a complete right-winger, which of course brings out the real nuts.
And then I have some straights, not a lot, but I have some straight guys that, listen to Joe Rogan and think Joe Rogan's a doctor and stuff. And they will say stuff to me, because when Rogan is your only exposure to the news, you're going to believe it. Yeah. And they'll say, RFK Jr., he's a big environmentalist and he stands up to big pharma. I'm like, yeah, 20 years ago. And when you even try to talk about the trial happening in New York court, they don't necessarily say fake news, but they kind of buy a little bit into the political persecution. And what scares me is I'm not just talking about Fox viewers. Like I said, I'm talking about, straight male comics, because I know too many of them. They really think Joe Rogan is the news. Politics are.
Well, they ain't good either, so.
Oh, and while I'm just crapping on Joe Rogan, because why wouldn't I crap on a guy with a giant audience? But anyway,
there you go.
I have to wonder, because when I first met him back in the day, he was a freaking road comic. Right. And he had a good act. He wasn't the best of the best. I don't think he would even say that, but he wasn't horrible. And then something happened where he decided to get all roided up. And I haven't seen him in many years, but the last time I saw him, I didn't even recognize him. And he became a UFC announcer, which is just, let's just take a minute. That's weird for a comic. I just want to say that we all kind of glossed over that, because who in the world could have thought Joe Rogan would become an extremely powerful voice in politics and an influential voice, but he has $100 million a year contract, which has been reported. I've read in my newspapers that nobody reads anymore, but it's maybe 200 million. And I think that has to influence why he wants to cozy up to Alex Jones.
Of course it does.
But that's so insane. How are you in a room with Alex Jones and thinking, this is just somebody with a different opinion? How do you get there?
Disinformation is very powerful and it's everywhere, especially when, we're all so siloed. So, there's no competing narrative. There's nothing challenging. And also people want to hear what fits in with their beliefs.
Yeah.
Anyway. But yes, the idea that somebody like Joe Rogan, who, has the IQ of a turnip, is so influential, is kind of terrifying. And the other thing that seems to be this narrative is, if you're on the left, if you are for the greater good, you don't really deserve to make money. You should do it all for free, and you should just be struggling financially. Only people who are grifting and selling their souls should be rich. It's completely crazy.
Yeah, so there you see that. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what to make of all that or even call it. I think it was a podcast, but I don't know, to be a podcast, does anyone have to actually be watching those two creepy ladies complain about more people want to listen to Joe Rogan than them? I think it was a podcast, not entirely sure, but sort of what it felt like, right? And that is what it felt like, that they're just complaining. They're hating on Rogan because people listen to him and not them. And honestly, you know, as Griffin is opining on how strange Rogan's career path was, isn't it amazing that it never dawns on her that she's literally talking to a woman who is only quote unquote famous because of a tell-all book that she wrote about her uncle, Donald Trump, that literally no one, not even people on the left, the crazies on the left, took seriously. And if she is famous, it's only among a very, very small and very, very strange group of people. And her entire claim to fame is her last name and the fact that she was willing to sell it, degrade it, debase it for money. And, you know, no one aside from MSNBC has ever cared what she has to say. And now, honestly, she spends more time talking about how no one ever listened to her warnings than she ever did given any warnings. And it's ironic, really. So we got a comedian whose untreated TDS literally destroyed her career with the head thing. And she's making a podcast with a fellow TDSers whose career is only possible because of TDS. It's really nuts. It's crazy when you think about it. And it's interesting. It's even more interesting, guys, they just don't get it. They can't see through their own jealousy to realize that people listen to Rogan because he is in the center, or people believe he's in the center. They trust that he's not a paid mouthpiece for any political party, any person, or any idea. And, you know, why would people listen to them? They don't offer anything different than 100 other identical sounding, scary looking feminists. I mean, how many different ways are there to say orange man bad? And granted, now that I say that, there is a lot of ways, right? But there's a lot to it, you know. But I think a lot of the reasons that much of the mainstream media journalists have really tried for a long time to destroy Joe Rogan, because that's what they've tried to do. I think it's because it truly does, like on a personal, like really like hurtful level, bother them. Bothers them that people listen to him and not them. That people trust him and believe him and not them. Even though they've done absolutely nothing to earn it. They've done the opposite. And, you know, it's only because the average person, guys, they're not glued to all the political nonsense like some of you and me are. I was just in Vegas and I was sitting down at a poker table and we got talking politics, which was kind of a mistake. There was a really far leftist Canadian there, which you don't ever associate far left with poker players because it is like a game of skill and you got to be smart. So it always confuses me. But the dealer was talking about how he gets all his news from Joe Rogan. And I don't think that that's an uncommon thing. You know, people aren't glued to their TVs like some of us are. They aren't dissecting all this political nonsense. And a lot of people do see good on both sides. You know, they see things happening in the world with an actual open mind. And a lot of people, you know, it's not even that they don't buy the party line being pushed, you know, all the narratives being pushed. It's because they never even heard it to begin with. And the only way they're looking at things is with basic reasoning and critical thinking skills. This is who the media, the left, this is who they believe Joe Rogan represents. So they attack him the same way they would attack any one of those people. And the same reason they attacked Musk, the same reason they initially attacked Donald Trump. And you know what? They're right. They should all feel threatened by men like that, by people like that. And every other critically thinking person in the world, they should feel threatened by us because we don't need them and we don't believe them. But I thought you guys would appreciate seeing that, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, guys, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. And we'll see you in the next one.